DevSecOps, our topic here today. So, a little bit about me. My name is Josh Minthorn. I'm director and co-founder here at Accelino. My background is in IT consulting, and I started on the development side, but really throughout my career, I became exposed to the infrastructure side of things as well, and also then part of the security side, and then as things went on, that also now moved into the cloud. And one of the things that I experienced early on in my career was the lack of automation and the impact that had, but also security, both on the infrastructure side and the app dev side. And the impact that had by not having security involved soon enough. And that's really what we're talking about today. It's really what drives DevSecOps. So, really here at Accelino, we take our expertise, we help companies adopt DevSecOps, which for some starts with DevOps, and we really understand the challenges and the changes that are required. We've worked with a lot of companies, and they've gone through and they've made some mistakes. So our goal is to, in working with those companies, right, to help others really avoid some of those mistakes or really make new mistakes, if you will. Mistakes are not bad. It's about learning. We need to go through those things. But what we do is help to maybe guide and avoid some of those pitfalls while still teaching. That's a big part of everything that we do with customers is our mentoring model and that upskilling piece. But really more importantly, we want to share our knowledge and again, that mentoring with organizations that we collaborate with. Now, if you haven't already listened to part one in our series, right, what we did is we talked about, the benefits of DevSecOps and what is DevSecOps. I'm going to circle back to that, but let's come here to the end real quick. So we're always thinking about going from the current state to the future state. So what do we want to do? What is the goal? Well, we want to increase our speed and the rate of delivery. We want to reduce the expense associated with delivery. That expense is not just how much does it cost to code. What about fixing defects? What about things being scanned and there's security issues and those security issues not being addressed, or security issues being found in an upper environment, right? For every environment, further up the environment, all the way out into production, the more expensive it becomes to address those issues. We want to have security and monitoring and deployment checks from beginning to end. And we want to make sure that all of IT supports open and transparent communication from development to operations and security. We want to have security by design and the ability to measure. Measure is key. We've got to know, and we're going to talk about this, we've got to know where we're starting. We've got to know as changes are being made, what is the impact to that, but also as things are running and going, what are the things that are being found? Right, those metrics, that gives great insight into what changes are being made and the progress that's being made. The other thing we want to do is we want to increase the recovery speed by decreasing troubleshooting time. And then what we want to do is improve security through automation. We talk about things like CI/CD and immutable infrastructure. Now, we're not going to get down into the really technical weeds today because DevSecOps covers a plethora of things. Really what this is about, how do you really start adopting DevSecOps? Part of this too is that the technical pieces are really going to be somewhat the same for everybody, but also somewhat different. Everybody's journey is a little bit different. Everybody's needs are a little bit different. So that technical piece, that really gets tailored into what's unique for you and what your needs are. Different groups, different organizations, different enterprise, and different enterprises have all are going to do it a little bit different. Yes, again, there are some things that are the same. Now, again, going back to kind of part one real quick, we said, well, what is DevSecOps? We want to take development, we want to take operations, we want to take security, we want to take application security, infrastructure security. We want to bring that all together. We don't want these, development does this thing, operations does this thing, security is then thinking of these two areas of security with application infrastructure. We want everybody to come together, we want everybody to be thinking about that. And so that means that there's now a focus on the security during the building and running of software. And now, by doing this is important, is there's now a culture where security is a shared responsibility throughout the IT lifecycle. What's really critical there is it's a shared responsibility. It's not just so security is now concerned about security and we've automated some things. Everybody's thinking about security. We'll get into that here a little bit later. And the other part of this is that, what we find in working with customers is that the DevSecOps mindset is so important because of the emphasis on the need to build security from the beginning, right? It becomes a bedrock. It becomes the foundation to building software and really to DevOps initiatives. And that's key. That's really, really key. Now, what we want to do is we want to move away from this development and QA and doing all of this demo, this planning, development, this testing, and then handing it over to the security team who's going to report, plan, scan, and test, and then eventually deploy. Why do we want to do this? We want to do this because we want to get away from this bottleneck. So with DevOps versus DevSecOps, we had development, we had testing, we had operations, and then we had security. Then it came back to operations. That's the deployment piece. That was a bottleneck. We want to get rid of that bottleneck, and we want to shift security left in the entire development lifecycle. The goal is to streamline, because if you have development, testing, and operations on the same page, and you've automated, you can only then go as fast as security, because that becomes a bottleneck. So any bottleneck in the process, even if it's not security, just anything in the SDLC that is a bottleneck, that will be the fastest that you can go. Unless you skip it, which then is really another conversation for another time. Now, when we think about all of these things, right, we covered these things in part 1. The other thing is, what do we cover in part 2, which was why? And we talked about the cost of a breach and the impact to a company. Really, the underlying theme here is that, when moving to improved proactive security, thereby folding security into the DevOps processes, it's no longer DevOps versus DevSecOps. And honestly, some call it DevSecOps, some call it just DevOps with security. Either term is fine. At the end of the day, what we're doing is we want to make sure that we're shifting everything left, including security. We're removing those bottlenecks. We're reducing risk. We're reducing and avoiding some of these costs. And now, what's happening is that we have a focus across teams about security instead of a single security team working outside the boundaries of the development lifecycle. Again, now there's a security focus among teams as opposed to a single security team working outside the boundaries of the development process. And real quick on some of these costs, as you can see, there was an increase in the average cost of a breach. And we're moving more towards a remote world and a hybrid working world. Well, there's a greater cost when it was remote work. When we think about the loss of business and the cost when individually identifiable information is involved. And what about credentials and all these sorts of things? All of these things, costs that happen when there is a breach, and nobody knows when a breach is going to happen. If we did that, we'd probably be the richest person in the world. But we can do things to avoid these, so that we reduce the cost when there is a potential breach, but also some of these breaches can be done to avoid the breach from happening in the first place. Again, that's the goal of DevOps with security or DevSecOps. So now we get into the meat of today, which is how. Okay, well, first, a couple of things. One, what are we going to start to do? This guides us. We're going to start to focus on security at the beginning, not at the end, not at the middle, at the beginning and throughout. We're going to work to increase quality and security with speed. We're going to leverage automation to reduce vulnerabilities and increase coverage. And we're going to encourage to build security into everything. These are some pillars that we're going to be going through. These are the things that need to kind of stick into our mind. Says, how are we going to go about this? Now, we're going to get into a little bit more of a methodical way to do this. But at the end, this is what we're doing. Security at the beginning, use automation, increase quality and security with speed. And we're going to encourage to build security into everything. How do we promote that? How do we guide and do that? How do we adopt that? And that's what we're talking about here today. Now, a couple of fundamentals. One, we know about shifting left. We talked about improved proactive security. Get a little more tactical, things like accelerated patching. That can be on the application level. That can also be the infrastructure level. That's a big key when we think of DevSecOps. Automation compatibility, okay? You need to have automation built into the modern development and release cycle. That's for infrastructure and applications, and security has to be a part of that. And we need to have a repeatable adaptive process. What does this mean? We need to be able to apply security consistently and at scale. So again, automation, security at the beginning, we're going to increase speed, we're going to, in security, we're going to reduce the time it takes to address things, to find things, and to release things. We want to make sure that it's now proactive security, and we're going to work to do this at scale. Okay, so 4 main things we're going to talk about here today. Education, learning, adopting a model and a framework, standardizing processes, and standardizing tooling. Now, these things don't necessarily happen one at a time. They happen together. One doesn't happen and then stop. They all continuously happen. When you start to adopt DevOps with security, DevSecOps, it is a journey, and you're always on it. Because things are changing, threats are changing, methodologies, down to technologies, how the business operates, which may change how the processes are done. Those things need to continue to be moving and maturing. We're going to talk about that piece as well. So first, let's kind of, I almost like to say the elephant in the room, which is educate, okay? Development operations, basically non-security teams, need to work with the security team around education. And here's why I say that. What we typically see is the security teams, right, they're focusing on security. They do not typically have experience and therefore understanding, not in a bad way, around the development life cycle and what happens. They're focused on security. They want to do things and say, we need this from a security standpoint. And really, if we extract what that means, security teams, they're actually acting as educators and advisors, right? They're running scans, they're providing information, they're providing material and other things to say, we've gone through this infrastructure, we have gone through this application and the code, and here are the security vulnerabilities that we've found. It is up to you to have those things fixed, but hey, we're letting you know that these things are here. And the things that you want to release and run things on and do things with, hey, we have found these things. Here's why these are of concern. The issues that are found. Here's the risk that it potentially provides. Right? Again, they're educating, they're advising. And at the end of the day, they're looking out for the business and IT's self-interest, just like everybody else. Now, the thing is, would a development team want to address security before they've done the work, while they're doing the work, or afterwards? And here's the thing. I remember back in the days when I was doing development, and a lot of people that are still doing development, and we hear about these, all hands on deck. And what I mean by that is something is found in production, and it's not good. Now everybody has to stop what they're doing and now turn their focus to this, all hands on deck. That's really disruptive. Necessary, but disruptive. also potentially avoidable. So when we think about everybody that's involved in that, would they rather do things before they ever get to that all hands on deck, or would they rather do it afterwards? I think everybody's going to say they'd rather do it and never try to get to that all hands on deck, because that literally means that it was missed or it's too late, and so many other things now get interrupted. Now, this is not just a one-way street with, just educating. Security needs to educate. Security also needs to be educated. We consistently see that on the development side of things, they need to educate security on what's going on, the development practices, what's the life cycle like, what's going on, how does this work, and the build and everything, so they understand the process. And here, this is where the security team is going to be learning and understanding. And really, one thing that's really important with this, and we see it all the time, is that when this doesn't happen, we see that there's a lot of friction between kind of the dev and operations team, primarily dev and security. Because what we see is the security team, again, correct intention, good intention, trying to force security things to be done during the SDLC. But the development team pushes back because they say, this is slowing us down. And so that joint education and understanding is critically important so that security can be done, but understanding how to do it in a way that actually enables the developers and speeds things up. And from the security side of things, that's a win-win, because now security is actually being done and more of it is being embraced in security at scale. The key thing here is there must be a joint understanding and agreement on the processes and the tools. Right? You're going to keep hearing that. We're going to keep talking through that. So the big thing here is, again, educating each other and understanding, and now working together as opposed to working separately. We've got to get away from working separately. Okay, what's the second thing we need to start to do? Well, we need to start to think about processes and things. Now, I say processes because we see this all the time. A very, very, very common pitfall that we see that needs to really try to be avoided, when looking at DevSecOps or DevOps, is making it about a set of tools. Right? We see time and time again where customers are looking at a set of tools and they're thinking, if I do this, this, and this to do these things around DevOps and security or DevSecOps, then we're good. But the problem is that that's a lot of times the cart before the horse. And so really, if you think about it, DevOps, DevSecOps, what we're doing is we're solving challenges using practices based on principles. This is where we start to get into a little bit of a framework. We've got to think through that. Okay, so we've got these principles, for example, automate. We want to eliminate risk early. We want to eliminate or waste. Those inform our practices, automated testing, automated deployments, for instance, the standardized DevOps ecosystem, things like value stream mapping. You use those practices now to resolve your challenges. Things like this manual testing, processes, manual deployments, manual releases. Maybe there's no integrated tools architecture, there's no traceability, or there's waste in the existing processes. One of the things we do working with customers is we have our principles, and there's more, this is just an example, okay, and there's some practices. We actually work to say, what are the challenges? And we start to line these things up in this mapping exercise so that we can really have it so that everybody is guided by these things, understanding here are the challenges. This is where you start to build out your roadmap and defining things and ranking things and prioritizing things based on your team or the groups or the organization. Again, not everybody's journey is exactly the same. So everybody might have the same challenges, but it might be that the challenges are in a different order because of different priority and importance. There's a different way to go about it. And that's part of the thing of going through this and making sure that it's not a one size fits all. Now, obviously there's this piece as we've just talked about, but the other piece is that we want to really work to combat the mistake around making it about tooling. And so with there, what we do is we work with customers, and we do this because we've seen it be successful. And I'll be honest with you, we early on, I've seen it where trying to implement, DevOps, DevSecOps, it can be done, but it's harder. It takes longer, there's more friction at times, things like that. We want to really shorten things and actually give, as they say, a kind of a ramp in a direction, if you will. And so the way that we do that is we implement a maturity model. And we measure across multiple dimensions, and across those dimensions we measure at different levels. And this really does two really very important things. What this does is it creates a clear path for teams to use and adopt DevSecOps. And it allows for measuring where teams are to guide where improvement should be made. DevOps for security, DevSecOps, it's not an instant thing, it is a journey. And every team's going to be a little bit different in every organization. But at least there's now a ramp to get there and to guide. And that can change a little bit over time. As we like to say, what you may consider, let's say, a level 3 across one particular area, now, maybe next year, that's a level 2. So the maturity has changed. That's okay. But it's about trying to get everybody focused and going in the right direction. So what we do is 5 dimensions: build and deployment, culture and organization, implementation, information gathering, test and verification. Now within these, there's kind of sub-dimensions, if you will, that really get much more granular. And what we do is we measure across those, we measure the different levels, and we work with customers. There's kind of a baseline that we start with. But then what it is that we start to modify these things, and we start to get into how do you measure these things. And again, this creates that roadmap. And that education needs to be happening. We're not talking about tools quite yet. We're just talking about a framework to start to get everybody pointed in the right direction and to start to get measured as well. And that's the other key thing. To be able to adopt this, how to really do DevSecOps, there's got to be a direction for everybody. And that is one of the biggest challenges that we see, is that typically, again, it's made about tools and there is no direction, or the direction is made about tools or other things. But there's got to be things outside of that, because tools come and go. Tools change. You might be trying to standardize now, or you've already standardized, or what we see quite often, kind of shadow IT, or if you will, lots of different groups, lots of different tools. And trying to standardize everything right now is going to be too difficult. Again, this goes back to, let's figure out what works. Sometimes you do a little bit of standardization across teams as they start to mature. Sometimes, you just start to standardize and then do the maturation. It's going to depend, right? It really is understanding the teams and the makeup and everything else to figure out what is the best way to do this, as opposed to just kind of forcing it in. Now, the other part is that this matrix, this framework, brings development, operations, and security together to outline what each would like to have. Let's go back to education. Now, everybody's working together to say, okay, here are the different levels. Here's what we're expecting to be done. Who's doing it, and by who, and everything. Now you start to get responsibility. More importantly, and if I would say probably one of the most important things, is now you are creating a shared vision built by the teams through collaboration. Every team feels as though they're heard, they're getting their wishes, they're going to be doing things faster. Now they're working to say, here's how we get there. Here's what we would like to have done. It also helps, instead of trying to boil the ocean, it helps set expectations within the different groups, security, development, operations, that there's got to be a little bit of a methodical approach to this. It's not, you got to do all of this or you haven't done anything, right? A little bit at a time. Because remember, A little bit at a time is better than nothing at all. Now that we have those expectations, now we measure how we can progress. Again, we avoid boiling the ocean. And these are mistakes that we see time and time again. So we want to, again, accelerate that adoption, clear expectations. And we do that by going through this, and we therefore reduce confusion and complexity. Right? And again, this gives you an idea of how do you measure across teams. And you set up and you got to collect metrics and you start to do this. But again, shared vision, collaboration, everybody's working through it. Now, what's next? Okay, education. We've got this matrix. We're starting to define that. We're working together. How we're going to do things. What else do we need to be doing in conjunction with all of this? The next piece is, what's the process? Just what's the process? And we typically see that there are two types of processes. There's the application-focused side and there's the infrastructure side of things. A lot of times DevSecOps is focused on the app side. It needs to be focused on application and infrastructure. When an application is running, where can there be security issues? The application code itself, how things are configured, even the infrastructure. Or if you've got an application talking to a database, how are the credentials being stored and communicated? There's communication there. There's multiple levels and pieces of where security. So you need to go through and do those things. Now this just gives a quick example of you're building an application and let's say potentially you're provisioning, depending if you have immutable infrastructure or what have you, and then you've got maybe app servers, you got database servers, and you got those things configured, you got things deployed on it. But then there's also, as an application is going, you may not have immutable infrastructure that you're standing up and tearing down all the time. But there is going to be infrastructure that also lives and breathes. And that needs to be managed as well. So you've got two different processes. Right? Infrastructure CMDB, CVEs, things like that, but on the code side, software composition analysis, SAST and DAST and things like that. They're different domains, if you will. Yet, both can still need to operate together and need to be part of the shared vision. It should not be separate. It just might be that there might be more focus on the app side, but it's not separate, it is together. So, need to go through and think about every part of the process and really understand the process and find areas of improvement. Call it a flaw, call it an opportunity to improve, an opportunity to mature, whatever that is, right? Identify the gaps. Think about where do you want to go. Think about that matrix and the education that's being done. Think about you outline this process, these teams together, they outline the process. Say, how does this fit now into our maturity model and how we're measuring? You don't want to boil the ocean, right? But what is our intended end state? The other part that is really, really important with this, mention that maturity model. What might be a level 3 this year could be a level 2 next year. And that might be because the process needs to change or something else. Or you've made changes and you've gotten so good that where you're at today, you're going to raise the bar. So level 3 today is level 2 next year, raising the bar, whatever it is. So what do we want to do here? Again, outline that ideal state, and then what else needs to be done? Well, first, let's think about this as what are the phases of the DevSecOps lifecycle and what needs to take place. Okay, I know there's a lot to this, but on the dev and the ops side here, you have these pipelines. What needs to take place? Code review, SAST, software composition, DAST, penetration testing, threat model policies, compliance validation, logging and auditing, threat intelligence, patching, security monitoring, all these sorts of things. Here's all the things that you want to cover. Where do these things happen in each of these individual pipelines? So it's not just this step, this step, this step, but what also needs to take place. Okay, now, what comes after this? Who is a responsible party? Or parties? Could be that there's a couple, and that's okay, but you got to define that. Who's responsible when there's a code review and something happens? Who gets communicated with? Same with SAST, or patching, or threat intelligence, or compliance validation. Who defines them, who creates them, who implements them, who shares that knowledge of what those now are, who is now involved and engaged in that process. So for instance, let's say that there's penetration testing done and there's an issue found. So penetration testing is going to be done by one team, but if something is found, who's the other team and how are they communicated? What's communicated to them? Start simple, iterate over this. That's part of the maturity levels. And start a little bit, let's just start to get something. Going through this too will help identify through the teams where there's a lack of communication, not on purpose. We've seen it where one team thought they were sharing the information and the other team said, you sent this to us, but we don't know what to do with it. And now we're getting that collaboration, that shared vision. Everybody's working together. So we've got all of this, and now it's all about that communication and everything. So now the question is, okay, now let's talk about tooling. Now that we've got this, now we understand how we're going to measure ourselves. We've educated ourselves. We've talked about our processes. What are the things that are part of a good DevOps lifecycle that need to take place, and the responsibility. Now, what is actually going to help do the work and help facilitate all of this? That's the key. A tool doesn't do it for you per se. A tool is there to facilitate and to help and to support. And with this is the important part where, what do you already have? Probably might find duplicative things. It's okay. Let's just go through, let's catalog these things. What was already there? It's very common for there to be duplicative things because over time, different development teams have done different things. It's okay. Now, the reason we want to go through this and start to get rid of duplicative things is because when there's duplicative things, you don't have a standardized process, you can't do things at scale, or it's very, very difficult. The other thing is that you don't have shared knowledge. If you're, let's say, for instance, you're using 2 different CI tools or 3 different CI tools, and multiple CD tools, and one team's each using their own. Every team is kind of implementing things on their own, and they've learned those things. Yet they're really truly doing a lot of the same thing. Whereas if it's using the same tool, it's like, oh, this other team did this. Here's the other thing, we go back to collaboration. Hey, so-and-so team, I see that in the maturity model, you're at this, for deployment, you're at this level. We're running into some challenges. How did you get past these? Did you face these? Oh yeah, we did face these. Here's what we did. Right? And it's talking again. How did you ever solve that? Regardless of the tool, but sometimes that tool conversation is going to come in place. And now they can say, oh, here's what we did. Here, just use this. And there's reusability. And so that's the big thing. You look across all these platforms, especially when you look at automation. It's about being able to do things in a repeatable fashion. And as they say, woodworking and a lot of other things, right? Measure twice, cut once is kind of the same thing. Right? Except cut once, use many. Sorry, that's a bad analogy, but I think you get where I'm going, which is one team can implement it and it works, and now other teams can start to use that when they're ready for it. And so in that case, you just cut the time in half. So 2 teams doing it. One team did it, but 2 teams are using it. That starts to scale out, that starts to save time. The other part with that too is if you ever got to make change, you only have to do it in one place. You know you've done it. Again, doing these things in a standardized way, doing it at scale. Now, catalog, and you go through and you do this. I'm going to say this is going to be challenging, especially a lot of times what we see is on the development side. What we see is that what development teams are currently using, you may not be continuing to use. You see, for whatever reason, not whatever reason, we understand it, but a lot of work and thought was put into, let's say, hey, we set up this tool and it's working and all these things, why do we need to change? We understand that, but it needs to be understood that what's being used today may not be used tomorrow. And really, it's got to be accepted that that's okay. Because remember, something wasn't being used before and something was brought in. We understand, yes, there's the hard work and everything, but this isn't about that. What this is about is making it so that, you've got that, maybe you've got that expertise and maybe you can now share that with other teams. And it's an opportunity to learn how to do something in maybe a different platform. But it's just like software. Software changes. And that's just got to be something that's accepted. And it really, at the end of the day, what this is about is those changes are being made by everyone in some form or fashion, because what this is doing is this is about making the SDLC faster and more secure. So give up a little to gain a lot. Remember, everybody's changing. And it's just again, what's the ultimate goal? So, we've educated, we've got this matrix and this roadmap, we've got our process and everything we want to do, we've aligned that, we've got who's responsible during those processes, again, aligned into our maturity model, and we're measuring. Now we figure out what we're using, we're going to start to standardize. So we've got our ingredients now. Okay. Now what we have to do is you just got to start moving. Say I don't remember exactly where I read it, but it really resonated with me, especially when it comes to really adopting DevOps security, DevSecOps, and that is that first-rate execution against a second-rate strategy is better than second-rate execution against a first-rate strategy. So you can sit, you can plan, but you got to get moving. And it's okay. There's going to be some challenges you face. We understand that. There's going to be learning. Those challenges are learning opportunities, but you've got to get started somewhere. And that's why we always say there's the education piece in that matrix and adoption framework, because that now guides. That starts the process of guiding, and it doesn't start it is the process of guiding and adoption. And then you adopt and you mature and you mature. Crawl, walk, run. So we're going to take all of those things, that education, the responsibility, the different pipelines, the tools, all of that stuff. You're going to pop that into your software supply chain. Your software supply chain is going to get better. You're going to increase quality, increase security. You're going to be able to deliver more and better features to the software. You've now got speed. Now as an organization, you've increased the adaptability, you've increased agility, and you've now increased flexibility. That is not only at the software standpoint, right, that infrastructure and everything, but also when something comes up, being able to troubleshoot and address it very, very quickly. And you're just going to keep getting better and better and better. At the same time, we're going to decrease time, therefore cost, and therefore risk. So what we're trying to do is get that automation. We're trying to really move towards removing the manual pieces. There's the collaboration, there's the communication and everything. And what do we have happening? We go from this kind of sequential DevSecOps to DevOps, and we're really now going to this concurrent DevOps, and it's got the security. It's faster, it's very visible, it's governed, right? Standardized processes, we're doing it at scale, everybody's talking, communicating, shared vision. You've got that maturity model, you see where everybody's kind of measured. And measured isn't the greatest term, because a lot of times we think of, oh, how are you measuring in comparison to somebody else? Like, who's better than this? This isn't about that. What this is really about, it's almost like a game of golf, right? What is your score? Yes, you're playing others, but really, what is your score? So where are you at, and what are you looking to do to get to that next level? And maybe there's others that have gotten past or at that next level or even further, and you can work with them to figure out how they overcame some challenges. So we've got better collaboration. Security, right? We're shifting that to the left, moving it further to the left, move. So now we're empowering people to act, giving them the things that they need to do in a process, understanding who's responsible and how things are communicated, because you are empowered to act. With that empowerment and that act comes greater responsibility. So there's greater accountability. So now we've got full accountability with all of the teams. We've got embedded security. What are we doing? We're moving right along. We're measured. We're known. Not only, again, in that framework, but also when we're going through and doing security, what's the quality of software? What are the number of issues that have been found and addressed? We have that at any given time. So the thing is, as we start to wrap up here, is, we think about the learning. It needs to really be understood and embraced. Mistakes are not mistakes. They're areas of learning. And, I talked about this in a podcast that I did. I mentioned Formula One. I'm a big fan of racing and everything. One of the things that, as I started getting into the sport, what fascinated me was that whether a team wins, they have a podium finish, or there's some other result, immediately after the race, the entire team is discussing what could have improved. Because maybe they won that day because another team didn't do well, made a mistake. What happens next time when that team doesn't make a mistake? Or what happens next time with somebody else who maybe finished a little bit further behind, didn't make a mistake, but they come and they bring a better setup and they're more prepared. Right? So they're constantly looking at how can we get better. The result of the race of that day was only for that day. How do they make sure that the next one and the next one and the next one is better? And it's always about improving. And it is a team effort. It's not on the driver. It's not on the race engineer. It's everybody coming together with their different perspectives. So again, that continual learning is done across all teams. And the big thing is that we've seen time and time again, DevOps is quote unquote implemented, and they're saying, yes, it is, but in reality, we see that there's a DevOps silo that's been created. It's like this whole other group, and it's like, hey, we do DevOps, we do the automation, you don't have to worry about this. It doesn't work. We see that, yes, some things have improved, but we've seen that there's lack of collaboration, and it's really just kind of repeating the sins of having the silos that we want to break down with just a different group, right? So we want to get away from that. So the thing we have to remember is that, everyone, the development teams, operations, testing, security, just everyone involved in the SDLC is working towards the same goal. It's just that each team contributes to that same goal differently. And that's why we say you've got to educate. That's why we talk about the maturity model and then these different teams working together on the processes and the tooling, because you're creating a software supply chain. Everything has to work together, because at the end of the day, it's everybody working together for that output, and everybody just puts into that output a slightly different piece. So as we wrap up, again, if you're continuing DevOps with security or DevSecOps, and you're looking to discuss this further, and how would you adopt either one of these, DevOps or DevSecOps, and the strategy, we can help you with this. You can reach out to us at hello@excelno.io. You can go to our website or any of our social platforms like LinkedIn, Twitter. So I just want to thank you, and I appreciate you joining today. This is part 3 of our DevSecOps webinar series. If you haven't already, you can listen to part 1, which is what is DevSecOps, or part 2, why DevSecOps is important. They're available on our website. And again, if you aren't already following us on LinkedIn or Twitter, please go ahead and follow us so you can stay up to date with other webinars and podcasts and other information that we're constantly sharing. We look forward from hearing you. I hope this was very insightful and that you can start to use these things in your DevOps journey.